Continuing, Chapter 3, Settling the Northern Colonies, the Pilgrims and their pilgrimage at Plymouth. The most famous congregation, starts on page 43. The most famous congregation of Separatists fleeing royal wrath departed for Holland in 1608. During the ensuing 12 years of toil and poverty, they were increasingly distressed by the Dutchification of their children. They longed to find a haven where they could live and die as Englishmen and women, and as purified Protestants. America was the logical refuge, despite the early ordeals of Jamestown and despite tales of New World cannibals roasting steaks from their white victims over open fires. A group of the Separatists in Holland, after negotiating with the Virginia Company, at length secured rights to settle under its jurisdiction. But their crowded Mayflower, 65 days at sea, missed its destination and arrived off the stony coast of New England in 1620, with a total of 102 persons. One had died en route, an unusually short casualty list, and one had been born and appropriately named Oceanus. Fewer than half of the entire party were Separatist. Prominent among the non-belongers was a peppery and stocky soldier of fortune, Captain Miles Standish, dubbed by one of his critics Captain Shrimp. He later rendered indispensable service as an Indian fighter and negotiator. I just realized I just keep going out of frame. The Pilgrims did not make their initial landing at Plymouth Rock as commonly supposed, but undertook a number of preliminary surveys. They finally chose for their site the shore of inhospitable Plymouth Bay. This area was outside the domain of the Virginia Company, and consequently the settlers became squatters. They were without legal right to the land and without specific authority to establish a government. Before disembarking, the Pilgrim leaders drew up and signed the brief Mayflower Compact. Although setting an invaluable precedent for later written constitutions, this document was not a constitution at all. It was a simple agreement to form a crude government and to submit to the will of the majority under the regulations agreed upon. The compact was signed by 41 adult males, 11 of them with the exalted rank of Mr., though not by the servants, and 2 seamen. The pact was a promising step toward genuine self-government, for soon the adult male settlers were assembling to make their own laws in open discussion town meetings, a vital laboratory of liberty. The Pilgrims' first winter of 1620 to 1621 took a grisly toll. Only 44 out of the 102 survived. At one time, only 7 were well enough to lay the dead in their frosty graves. Yet when the Mayflower sailed back to England in the spring, not a single one of the courageous band of Separatists left. As one of them wrote, It is not with us as with other men, whom small things can discourage. God made his children prosperous so the Pilgrims believed. The next autumn, that of 1621, brought bountiful harvest, and with them the first Thanksgiving Day in New England. In time, the frail colony found sound economic legs in fur, fish, and lumber. The beaver and the Bible were the early mainstays, and the one for the sustenance of the body, the other the sustenance for the soul. Plymouth proved that the English could maintain themselves in this uninviting region. The Pilgrims were extremely fortunate in their leaders. Prominent among them was the cultured William Bradford, a self-taught scholar who read Hebrew, Greek, Latin, French, and Dutch. He was chosen governor 30 times in the annual elections. Among his major worries was his fear that independent, non-Puritan settlers on their particular might corrupt his godly experiment in the wilderness. Bustling fishing villages and other settlements did sprout to the north of Plymouth on the storm-lashed shores of Massachusetts Bay, where many people were as much interested in cod as God. Quiet and quaint, the little colony of Plymouth was never important economically or numerically. Its population numbered only 7,000 by 1691 when, still chartless, it merged with its giant neighbor, the Massachusetts Bay Colony. But the tiny settlement of Pilgrims was big both morally and spiritually. Hope you enjoyed.